My children threw me into a neglected nursing home. They cried when they saw me at the board meeting, buying their company. The cool, sterile air of the golden years retreat clung to Alara Thorne like a shroud, a stark contrast to the opulent warmth of her own home. But then, it wasn't her home anymore, was it? That sprawling estate with its sun-drenched conservatory and sprawling gardens, the place where Thomas and she had built a life, nurtured dreams, and raised a family, was now a distant echo. Her son, Corvin, had delivered the news over a stilted video call, his face a pixelated mask of feigned concern. His voice, usually so confident, had wavered slightly, as if reciting a well-rehearsed script. "Mother, it's for your own good. Your health, you know. And our schedules, they're just so demanding these days." Lyra, his wife, had nodded beside him, her perfectly manicured hands clasped, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips, a tiny ripple of triumph that Alara had not missed. They spoke of a declining health and busy schedules as if Alara, at 78, had suddenly become a fragile, forgetful invalid, rather than the sharp-minded, independent woman she still was. The truth, Alara knew, was far simpler and far crueler. She was no longer convenient. A staff member, a young woman whose name Alara hadn't quite caught, gently placed a small, deflated-looking plant on her bedside table, a gesture meant to be comforting but felt utterly hollow. The plant, a drooping fern, seemed to mirror the last vestiges of hope Alara had clung to. She watched the young woman leave, the door clicking shut with a finality that echoed in the quiet room. It was not just a door closing, it was a chapter slamming shut, sealing her in this new, alien existence. She looked around at the sparse, impersonal space, a room designed for transient occupancy, devoid of any personal touch, a stark prison compared to the sun-drenched conservatory and sprawling gardens of her estate. The scent of antiseptic and old linen filled the air, replacing the familiar aroma of her rose garden and Thomas's leather-bound books. This was their ultimate act of disrespect, the final, blatant declaration of her expendability. A wave of something cold, something far beyond sadness, washed over her. It wasn't the sting of betrayal, for that had been a dull ache for years, a chronic pain she had learned to live with. This was the icy clarity of absolute abandonment. A profound silence settled within her, not of grief, but of a quiet, burning resolve. She had been their ATM, their safety net, their silent benefactor for decades. Now, she was merely a nuisance to be swept away. But Corvin and Lyra, in their short-sighted greed, had just made the gravest mistake of their lives. They had mistaken her quiet demeanor for weakness, her boundless generosity for an endless supply. They had, indeed, thrown her away. What they didn't know was that Alara Thorne was about to remind them, with devastating precision, exactly who she was. For close to 50 years, Alara Thorne had been the epitome of quiet strength and unwavering devotion. Her late husband, Thomas, a man of profound intellect and even greater foresight, had built a formidable financial empire, one he meticulously managed and, upon his passing a decade ago, bequeathed entirely to Alara. Thomas had been a visionary, an architect of wealth who believed in sustainable growth and ethical investment. He had taught Alara everything, not just the mechanics of finance, but the philosophy behind it. He had often said, "Our wealth is a tool, Alara, not an end in itself. Use it to build, to support, to uplift." And for years, Alara had taken those words to heart, applying them with boundless generosity to the only family she had left, her son, Corvin, his wife, Lyra, and their 2 children, Liam and Chloe. She had been his trusted confidant, his partner in every sense, poring over ledgers, discussing market trends, and analyzing investments late into the night. She understood the intricacies of their vast fortune better than anyone, for she had helped forge it. From the very beginning of Corvin's adult life, Alara had been his silent financial anchor. When Corvin, fresh out of university with an ambitious but ultimately fragile business idea, a convoluted plan for a niche tech startup he called Innovatech Solutions, struggled to secure a mortgage for his first modest home, Alara had quietly provided the hefty down payment, framing it as an early inheritance. She remembered the flicker of genuine excitement on Corvin's face then, quickly replaced by a casual acceptance. He had accepted it without a moment's hesitation, his gratitude fleeting, almost an afterthought, like collecting a due dividend. Elara had hoped then that this seed of generosity would foster independence, not dependence. She had been wrong. As his family grew, so did their aspirations, and Elara's financial contributions escalated. She had covered the mortgage payments on their increasingly grand houses, each one larger and more ostentatious than the last, a continuous, upward spiral of perceived status. The modest suburban home quickly gave way to a sprawling 5-bedroom mansion in an affluent neighborhood, then to an even more expansive 7-bedroom estate complete with a sparkling swimming pool, manicured tennis courts, and a 3-car garage always filled with gleaming new vehicles. All had been largely subsidized, if not outright paid for, by Elara's silent transfers, managed discreetly through her financial advisor, Mr. Arthur Davies. She would simply receive a call from Lyra detailing a new, dream home, and a few days later, the necessary funds would materialize in Corvin's account, no questions asked. Lyra, with her insatiable appetite for social climbing and designer labels, had quickly identified Elara as the family's inexhaustible ATM. New luxury cars, a sleek BMW sedan one year, a powerful Mercedes SUV the next, replaced every 2 to 3 years without fail, appeared in their driveway, always funded by an unexpected bonus from Elara. Lyra would send Elara photos of herself posing beside the new vehicles, a triumphant gleam in her eyes, as if she had personally earned the privilege. The grandchildren's private school fees, exorbitant sums charged by elite institutions that promised a pathway to Ivy League universities, were seamlessly covered by Elara's accounts. She remembered signing the checks for the Sterling Academy and St. Augustine's Preparatory, hoping that at least Liam and Chloe would value education and hard work, unlike their parents. Extravagant family holidays, 2 weeks in the Maldives, a month-long tour of European capitals, exclusive ski trips to the Swiss Alps, were planned with an assumption that Elara would pick up the tab for flights, 5-star accommodations, and lavish excursions. "Oh, Mother, it's just so wonderful to treat the children to these experiences," Lyra would gush over the phone, her voice dripping with affected sweetness, never once offering to contribute, never acknowledging the source of such endless bounty beyond a dismissive "thank you." Elara had watched it all unfold, a quiet sadness deepening in her heart. She had wanted to be an active, cherished part of their lives, not merely a dispenser of funds. She remembered the early days when she would visit Corvin's first small home, bringing homemade meals, babysitting the grandchildren, feeling truly useful and needed. But as their wealth grew, fueled by her generosity, so did their distance. Family dinners became rare occurrences, often cancelled at the last minute with flimsy excuses about work commitments or social engagements that always seemed to involve Lyra's ever-expanding circle of wealthy acquaintances. Holidays were planned without her, celebrated in distant, exclusive resorts while Elara spent Christmases and Easters alone in her grand, quiet home, eating a solitary meal, listening to the silence. The subtle slights grew bolder, more frequent. "Mother, your house is a bit dated, don't you think?" Lyra would remark, eyeing Elara's cherished antique furniture, pieces Thomas had painstakingly collected, with thinly veiled disdain. "Perhaps you should consider a modern redecoration, or maybe even downsizing. It's really quite large for one person." Corvin would dismiss her advice on financial matters with a patronizing chuckle. "Oh, Mother, the market's changed so much, you wouldn't understand. It's all about venture capital and disruptive tech now, not old money investments." They would openly discuss their lavish purchases in front of her, their latest designer clothes, the new yacht they were considering leasing, never once offering to include her, never once wondering if she might like to join them. She was seen, not heard. She was the financial backbone, yet entirely excluded from the life she funded. Elara's internal world was a landscape of fading hope and growing resentment. She yearned for genuine connection, for the warmth of family, for a simple hug or an honest conversation, but each interaction chipped away at her spirit, leaving her feeling emptier. She often found herself sitting in her drawing room, the silence deafening, wondering where she had gone wrong. Had she given too much? Had her generosity fostered this insatiable greed, this entitled indifference? She had clung to the belief that her support ensured their happiness, and perhaps, in return, they would eventually realize the value of her presence, not just her purse. But that day never came. She was a resource, a convenience, a burden to be tolerated when not actively needed for funds. This long, slow erosion of respect had prepared her, in a way, for the ultimate act of abandonment. The nursing home was not merely a physical relocation, it was a metaphor for how they truly saw her, disposable. And as the door closed behind Corvin and Lyra, leaving her in that stark, impersonal room, the last flicker of desperate hope died, replaced by a cold, hard resolve that would reshape their lives forever. The chill of the nursing home room was not merely physical, it permeated Alara's very being, settling deep in her bones. She sat on the edge of the stiff bed, the thin blanket offering little comfort, the uncomfortable mattress a stark reminder of her new reality. For years, she had felt like a ghost in her own family's narrative, a silent patron whose presence was tolerated only for the financial gifts she bestowed. But now, in this place of forgotten souls and faded memories, the truth was starkly undeniable, she was completely discarded. The image of Corvin and Lyra waving goodbye, their faces already distant and unconcerned even before they left the parking lot, replayed in her mind, a freeze frame of their callous indifference. There was no pain now, no tears, only a profound, almost surgical clarity, as if a thick fog had finally lifted. They saw her as a nuisance, a burden, a fading relic to be neatly tucked away so they could continue their lavish lives unimpeded. This realization, sharp and undeniable, was not a breaking point, but a hardening, a forging of steel within her spirit. Alara reached for her discreet, older model phone, the one she kept primarily for her most trusted contacts, not the flashy smartphone Corvin had insisted she use for family video calls, which she barely knew how to operate anyway. Her fingers, though slender and age-spotted, moved with a surprising firmness, a newfound decisiveness, as she dialed the private number of Mr. Arthur Davies, her financial advisor of over 3 decades. Mr. Davies was not merely an advisor, he was a silent partner in her late husband's legacy, a man of impeccable discretion and unwavering loyalty, who had often, through subtle glances and quiet sighs, conveyed his unspoken disapproval of Corvin and Lyra's excesses. Arthur, Alara's voice was low, devoid of its usual gentle lilt, clipped and precise. "It's Alara. I need you to do something for me. Immediately." Mr. Davies, recognizing the unusual gravity in her tone, the uncharacteristic urgency, listened intently. Alara, with a chilling calm, outlined her instructions, each word carefully chosen, each instruction a calculated strike. "Firstly," she began, "I want all direct financial transfers to Corvin and Lyra Thorne ceased, effective immediately. Every single one. Their mortgage payments, their credit card bills, the children's school fees, the car leases, the holiday funds, everything. The direct debits, the standing orders, the ad hoc wire transfers. Stop it all." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle, envisioning the chaos this would unleash. "Secondly, I want any powers of attorney they may have over my affairs revoked. Immediately. And any assets they might be able to access, any joint accounts, any lines of credit, I want them locked down, divested, or transferred into impenetrable trusts in my name only. Ensure not a single penny or a single decision can be made by them on my behalf." Mr. Davies, a man who had witnessed the Thorne family's burgeoning extravagance with quiet disapproval over the years, felt a surge of respect for Alara's newfound resolve. He had seen the quiet pain in her eyes, the polite excuses she made for their absences. "Understood, Alara," he said, his voice firm, a hint of admiration in his tone. "Consider it done. This will, of course, cause quite a stir. A significant one, I dare say." "Let it," Alara replied, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor of satisfaction, a small spark of defiant joy in her voice. Now, for the main course. She then unveiled the extent of her secret investments in Corvin's struggling tech company, Innovatech Solutions. For years, she had been discreetly propping up his failing venture, buying shares through shell corporations and providing anonymous loans, all funneled through layers of trusts managed by Mr. Davies. Corvin, in his arrogance, had believed his company was succeeding on its own merits, blissfully unaware that his mother was the invisible force preventing its collapse, a financial life support machine he never knew existed. "I want you to consolidate all those hidden investments, Arthur. And then, I want you to acquire a controlling stake in Innovatech Solutions. Whatever it takes, however quickly you can do it. Discreetly, of course, until the time is right. I want to own it." Mr. Davies was momentarily stunned. He had known Alara possessed a formidable fortune, but the extent of her strategic foresight, her long-term, calculated propping up of Corvin's company, and now this audacious move, was truly astonishing. "Alara," he said, the respect clear in his voice, "this is a monumental move. It will change everything. Not just for them, but for the company itself." "That," Alara said, a faint, almost chilling smile touching her lips, a smile born not of malice, but of deep-seated purpose, "is precisely the point." The first ripple of panic in the Thorne household was barely noticeable, a tiny tremor before the earthquake. Corvin was at a high-stakes business dinner, attempting to impress potential investors for Innovatech Solutions, when his personal credit card was declined at a Michelin-starred restaurant. The waiter, immaculately dressed, whispered, "I'm sorry, sir, the card was declined." Corvin, embarrassed, muttered, "Impossible," pulling out another, a corporate card, then a third. Each was rejected with the same polite but firm message. He ended up having to call a junior associate to cover the bill, a humiliating experience that he blamed on a bank glitch, his face burning with a mixture of anger and shame. He had never had a card declined in his life. Lyra's shock was far more dramatic and public. The following morning, her attempt to purchase an antique diamond necklace she had been coveting, a piece she had been saving for, or rather, waiting for Alara to fund, was met with a polite but firm "card declined" from the boutique manager. Lyra, incandescent with rage, her carefully constructed composure shattering, shrieked at the sales assistant, convinced it was an error, a petty act of sabotage. "This is preposterous. My card is always valid." She called her bank, then Corvin, demanding answers, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. The bank, however, was unequivocal: the funds were simply not there. The credit limit had been reached, the accounts were empty. The next few days brought a cascade of increasingly alarming news, each notification a hammer blow to their gilded cage. A notice arrived from the Sterling Academy, the children's elite private school, stating Liam and Chloe's tuition fees were overdue, threatening immediate suspension if not paid within 48 hours. The car lease company called, demanding immediate payment for 2 months of missed installments on both the BMW and the Mercedes, threatening repossession. The calls became more frequent, more insistent, the polite tones replaced by terse demands. The biggest blow came when the mortgage company notified them that their last payment had bounced, and if the arrears, an astronomical sum, were not cleared immediately, foreclosure proceedings would begin. The grand, sprawling estate, the symbol of their success, now felt like a ticking time bomb. Corvin's veneer of calm shattered completely. He paced their lavish living room, the Persian rug suddenly feeling like a hot griddle beneath his feet, cell phone glued to his ear, shouting at bewildered bank managers and confused school administrators, none of whom could offer an explanation beyond insufficient funds. Lyra, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her, dissolved into hysterical tears, her designer clothes now seeming ironically flimsy. "What's happening, Corvin? We're ruined. This can't be happening. Our lives, the children's future." Corvin, his mind racing, a cold dread seeping into his stomach, suddenly remembered something, a vague, distant thought that solidified into a chilling realization. "Mother," he exclaimed, the name escaping his lips like a physical blow. It has to be Mother. She always handles these things. He had always assumed her generosity was simply a quiet, unending flow, a natural resource, like the sun rising each day. Now, the tap had been abruptly, irrevocably turned off, not just a trickle, but a complete cessation. The panic truly set in, cold and nauseating, a visceral fear he had never known. The golden goose, it seemed, had suddenly stopped laying. And they had no idea why, or how to restart the flow. The silence that had settled upon Alara Thorne in the nursing home was not merely external, it was internal, a profound sense of calm that had replaced years of suppressed hurt, of yearning for affection that never came. She ate her meals with quiet dignity, took short walks in the manicured, if somewhat bland, garden, observing the other residents with a detached curiosity, almost as if she were a visitor, not a permanent fixture. She felt strangely unburdened, as if a great weight, a heavy cloak of obligation and emotional debt, had been lifted from her shoulders. She knew the storm was brewing, the reverberations of her quiet command rippling through their carefully constructed lives, and she waited for it with a quiet, unwavering resolve. It came on a Tuesday afternoon, a little over a week after the financial taps had been turned off. Corvin and Lyra, their faces pale and drawn, their usual polished veneer replaced by a frantic desperation, burst into the nursing home reception area, demanding to see Alara. Their expensive clothes, once so immaculate, seemed rumpled, their expressions etched with a raw anxiety. They were admitted to Alara's room, their eyes scanning the sparse surroundings with a mixture of shock and disdain, as if only now truly registering the bleakness of the place they had so casually consigned her to, the cold reality of her living conditions. "Mother." Corvin blurted out, his voice a strained mixture of feigned concern and barely concealed anger, his words tumbling over each other. "What is happening? The bank, the school, the cars, everything is being cut off. What have you done? You can't just do this to us." Lyra, ever the dramatist, sank into the room's single uncomfortable armchair, pressing a trembling hand to her forehead, as if on the verge of collapse. "Grandmother, how could you? Think of the children. They'll be expelled. Our entire life is falling apart. Our reputation, everything we've worked for." Alara simply looked at them, her gaze steady and unblinking. There was no warmth, no anger, only an unsettling detachment in her eyes, a cool, appraising look that held no recognition of their distress. "Oh," she said, her voice soft, almost a whisper, yet it carried an undeniable steel, a quiet force that filled the small room. "So you've noticed. It seems my absence from your lives is only noticed when my money is too." Corvin bristled, his face contorting in a mixture of indignation and desperation. "Noticed? Mother, this is not a game. Our credit cards are being declined, our mortgage is overdue. Innovatech is facing a liquidity crisis because you've stopped the transfers." He struggled to find a polite word for the endless flow of money he had come to expect, the unspoken obligation she had upheld for decades. He looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time in years, searching for the compliant, generous woman he had always known, but finding only this unyielding stranger. "Transfers," Alara repeated, a faint, chilling smile touching her lips, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, the transfers. Funny how you only truly notice my presence when my money isn't there, isn't it? When the well runs dry." Lyra shot up from the armchair, her voice rising to a shrill crescendo. "This is cruel, grandmother. After everything we've done for you. After all the sacrifices we made to ensure you were comfortable here. We chose this place specifically for your well-being." Alara's gaze sharpened, cutting through Lyra's histrionics, slicing through the years of polite silence. "Sacrifices? Is that what you call it, Lyra? Packing a small bag for me, driving me to this facility," her eyes swept around the sparse room, lingering on the deflated fern, "and then leaving me here without a single backward glance, citing my declining health and your busy schedules?" Her voice remained quiet, almost conversational, but each word was a precisely aimed dart, finding its mark. Were those the sacrifices you made while you jetted off to the Maldives, a holiday I paid for, without even an invitation for me? Or perhaps when you celebrated Christmas in Verbier, again on my dime, while I sat alone in my dated home, as you so elegantly put it? Corvin's face went crimson, a flush of shame and anger. Mother, that's unfair. We love you. We thought this was best for you. For your safety, your care. He tried to grasp her hand, but Alara pulled it away, her movements precise and firm. You thought this was best for yourselves, Alara corrected calmly, her eyes piercing through their flimsy excuses. You saw me as a burden, an old woman who was no longer useful, merely a source of funds to fuel your extravagant lives. You didn't want me in your home, at your table, or in your lives, unless it was to write a check. You wanted me gone. She paused, her eyes sweeping over their shocked faces, noting the dawning realization in Corvin's eyes, the true terror in Lyra's. Well, consider your wishes granted. You wanted me out of your lives. I am out. And the well, my dear children, is now dry. Completely dry. You can't do this. Corvin roared, desperation finally breaking through his facade of indignation, his voice cracking. What about Liam and Chloe? Your grandchildren. Are you truly so heartless as to ruin their future? To pull them out of school? Their future? Alara countered, a flicker of genuine sadness mixed with her unyielding resolve, a brief flash of the pain she had endured for them. Their future, Corvin, was built on the quicksand of my generosity, not on your hard work or responsibility. They have learned that life is an endless stream of luxury, paid for by someone else. And that, I assure you, is a far more devastating lesson than learning to stand on their own 2 feet, to understand the value of honest effort. Her voice hardened once more, the slight tremor of satisfaction returning. You ask me what I have done. I have reclaimed what is mine. I have cut the cord you have so carelessly abused. And my decision is final. There will be no more money. Not for the house, not for the cars, not for the schools, and certainly not for your failing company. Innovatech, Corvin, is a shambles, propped up by my investment. Now, even that will cease. Corvin stared at her, a dawning horror in his eyes. He had no idea how she knew about Innovatech's true state, how she could be so certain, so knowledgeable about his carefully concealed failures. He suddenly felt a chilling premonition of the full, devastating scope of her actions, a premonition that extended far beyond mere financial cuts. Lyra, her tears now genuine, the perfect mascara streaking her pale cheeks, stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth, a strangled gasp escaping her lips. They had come to manipulate, to demand, to emotionally blackmail. Instead, they had found a woman utterly transformed, an unyielding force they had never known existed. The Alara they had known, the generous, long-suffering Alara, was gone. In her place sat a queen on her throne of quiet vengeance, and they were utterly powerless before her. Without another word, defeated and hollow, their shoulders slumped, Corvin and Lyra turned and walked out of the room, leaving Alara Thorne alone once more, but this time, utterly liberated. The drive back to their mansion was silent, punctuated only by Lyra's ragged sobs, each one a testament to her shattered illusions. Corvin's mind reeled, a chaotic maelstrom of anger, disbelief, and a growing, suffocating fear. He had expected pleas, tears, perhaps even a dramatic collapse from his mother, a scene he could manipulate. Instead, he had faced an ice-cold resolve, a woman utterly unlike the one he had taken for granted for decades. Her words about Innovatech had struck a particularly chilling chord. How could she possibly know the true extent of his company's precarious financial situation? It was a secret he had meticulously guarded. They arrived home to a house that suddenly felt cold, cavernous, and terribly vulnerable, its vastness mocking their precarious situation. The stack of unopened mail on the polished mahogany table seemed to mock them, each envelope a potential harbinger of doom. Corvin ripped open the top one, a final notice from the mortgage company, threatening immediate foreclosure if the astronomical sum wasn't paid within 48 hours. Another was from St. Augustine's Preparatory, confirming Liam and Chloe's expulsion unless overdue tuition was remitted by the end of the week. The car lease company threatened repossession, demanding the return of both luxury vehicles by morning. The phone rang incessantly, each call a new demand, a new threat. "We're ruined," Lyra whispered, her face blotchy and swollen from crying, her voice barely audible. "Utterly ruined. What are we going to do?" The reality of their situation, stripped bare of Alara's constant financial infusions, was brutal and immediate. Corvin tried calling his business contacts, feigning an unexpected cash flow issue at Innovatech, attempting to secure emergency loans. But without his mother's secret, consistent propping up, the company was a house of cards. His suppliers, already wary of late payments, demanded upfront payments. His few remaining clients became wary, smelling blood in the water, and his employees, sensing the imminent collapse, began quietly looking for new opportunities, a mass exodus underway. Lyra, meanwhile, attempted to call her socialite friends, hoping to borrow money or find a sympathetic ear, but the moment word spread that the Thorne family's seemingly endless funds had evaporated, the invitations stopped, and her calls went unanswered. Their carefully cultivated social standing, built entirely on a foundation of borrowed wealth and superficial connections, crumbled around them, exposing their isolation. They were forced to sell Lyra's designer handbags, her expensive jewelry, and even their 2 luxury cars, pawned for a fraction of their worth just to keep the bank at bay for a few more desperate days, the humiliation a bitter taste in their mouths. The mansion, too grand and expensive to maintain, a constant drain on their now non-existent resources, was put on the market, a stark symbol of their rapidly evaporating lifestyle. Corvin, for the first time in his adult life, considered the daunting prospect of finding a real job, one that didn't rely on his mother's hidden generosity or his own inflated sense of self-worth. Lyra, equally stunned by their precipitous fall from grace, contemplated having to work for the first time in her life, a concept entirely alien to her. The children, bewildered and upset, struggled to understand why their private school was no longer an option, why their expensive extracurriculars had been cancelled, and why their parents were constantly fighting. Their once idyllic bubble burst. While Corvin and Lyra descended into a spiral of panic and recrimination, Alara Thorne was taking her first steps toward a new, truly liberated life. The day after their confrontation, Alara had a quiet conversation with the nursing home director. With Mr. Davies' swift action, a new, elegant, and perfectly appointed independent living apartment had already been secured for her in a prestigious part of the city, not far from her old home, but a world away in terms of atmosphere. It came complete with attentive staff, gourmet meals prepared by a resident chef, and a vibrant community of interesting, intellectually curious individuals. She wasn't fleeing, she was upgrading, a subtle act of defiance against the neglect she had suffered, a testament to her reclaiming control. She settled into her new home with a sense of profound peace. The first thing she did was call Martha, a dear friend from her bridge club, whom she hadn't seen in months, having been too ashamed to admit her predicament at the nursing home. "Martha," Alara said, her voice light and clear, imbued with a newfound cheerfulness, "I'm free. And I'd love to have you over for tea. I have so much to tell you." She then booked a luxurious cruise through the Norwegian fjords, something she and Thomas had always dreamed of but had put off for various family emergencies over the years. Alara spent her first few days in her new apartment simply reading, rediscovering her love for classic literature, enjoying the quiet, and feeling the profound lightness of a life unburdened by others' expectations and endless demands. She was no longer a silent ATM, she was Alara Thorne, a woman ready to live for herself, truly for the first time in decades, nurturing her own joys and desires. Months later, the transformation in Alara Thorne was profound. Her eyes sparkled with a renewed vitality, reflecting a deep inner contentment. Her posture was straighter, more confident, and a genuine smile often graced her lips, replacing the polite, strained expression she had worn for years. She had shed the invisible cloak of obligation and grief that had weighed her down for years. Her new independent living community was a haven of stimulating activities and genuine companionship. She had enrolled in an art class, discovering a latent talent for watercolor painting, her strokes confident and expressive. She had joined a book club, engaging in lively discussions that challenged her mind and introduced her to new perspectives. The Norwegian fjord cruise had been magnificent, followed by a cultural tour of Italy and plans for a safari in Africa. Elara was finally spending her money on herself, on experiences that enriched her soul, on comforts that brought her joy, not on the insatiable appetites of others. Her home, though smaller than her previous estate, was a sanctuary filled with books, beautiful art, and the quiet hum of contentment, a place where she felt truly at peace. She had new friends who valued her for her wit, her wisdom, and her companionship, not for her bank balance, but for the person she truly was. Meanwhile, the Thorne family's world had completely imploded. Corvin's company, Innovatech Solutions, teetered on the brink of bankruptcy, its carefully constructed facade of success now a crumbling ruin. Without Elara's secret financial life support, the pretense had crumbled, revealing the rotten core of mismanagement, shoddy innovation, and crippling debt. Corvin had tried everything: desperate loans from predatory lenders, futile attempts to attract new investors who saw through his bluster, even selling off company assets at fire sale prices. Each desperate maneuver only deepened the hole. Lyra had been forced to take a job in retail, working long hours for meager pay, a humiliating blow to her carefully constructed social image. Their sprawling mansion had been repossessed, the grand symbol of their former life snatched away, and they now lived in a modest, rented apartment in a less desirable part of town, constantly bickering, their former life of effortless luxury a distant, bitter memory, a phantom limb. Liam and Chloe, now attending public school, struggled to adjust to their dramatically altered circumstances, forced to confront the harsh realities of a world where money wasn't an endless resource, where privileges had to be earned. The climax of their downfall came at a decisive board meeting for Innovatech Solutions. Corvin sat at the head of the polished conference table, his face drawn, haggard, his suit rumpled and ill-fitting. The remaining board members, a grim collection of investors and creditors, looked at him with thinly veiled contempt, their patience worn thin. He was outlining his latest desperate plan for a last-ditch capital injection, a plan devoid of substance, when the door opened, and a figure walked in. It was Elara Thorne. She walked in, not with a triumphant stride, but with a quiet dignity, her silver hair impeccably styled, gleaming under the conference room lights, her elegant suit tailored perfectly, exuding an aura of calm authority. By her side was Mr. Arthur Davies, his expression solemn, a thick binder of documents clutched in his hand. Corvin and Lyra, who had also been summoned to the meeting as major stakeholders, though now powerless ones, their shares diluted, their influence evaporated, gasped. Lyra clutched Corvin's arm, her eyes wide with disbelief and dawning horror, a silent scream trapped in her throat. Mr. Davies approached the table, the stack of documents in his hand a tangible representation of their fate. "Gentlemen," he announced, his voice clear and resonant, cutting through the tense silence, "I have an important announcement. Through a series of strategic acquisitions over the past months, quietly executed and meticulously planned, I am pleased to introduce your new majority shareholder and, indeed, the new chairwoman of Innovatech Solutions, Ms. Elara Thorne." A stunned silence fell over the room, thick and heavy. Corvin felt the blood drain from his face, leaving it ashen. Lyra let out a small, strangled sob, a pathetic sound. Their eyes, once filled with disdain for the old woman they had cast aside, were now wide with a mixture of terror and utter comprehension, a horrifying realization that dawned upon them with brutal clarity. Elara, composed and powerful, met their gaze. There was no malice in her eyes, no overt triumph, but a cold, hard satisfaction, an unshakable resolve. She had not come to gloat, but to finalize what she had started, to secure her investment, to reclaim what had always been hers, and to ensure that her legacy would not be squandered by their greed. Elara took her seat at the head of the table, the chair seeming to mold to her form, as if it had always been waiting for her. "Corvin," she said, her voice steady, devoid of emotion, a simple statement of fact. "Your services as CEO are no longer required. Effective immediately." It was then, in that moment of absolute, undeniable defeat, stripped of every illusion, that Corvin Thorne's eyes welled up. Tears streamed down his face, not of remorse for how he had treated his mother, not of regret for his actions, but of pure, unadulterated terror for his shattered ambition, his lost status, his utterly ruined life. Lyra too began to weep openly, her carefully constructed world utterly obliterated, her dreams turned to ashes. They had cast their mother out, believing her to be a fading, disposable burden. They cried not because they truly saw her for the first time as a woman of strength and resolve, but because they finally saw themselves, reflected in the cold, hard mirror of her power, exposed as the entitled, ungrateful people they had become. In the months that followed, Elara continued to flourish, spending her days pursuing new passions, surrounded by genuine affection and respect, truly living for herself. She remained the chairwoman of Innovatech, overseeing its restructuring with a keen business mind, transforming it into a profitable venture under new, competent leadership, ensuring its future viability. Corvin and Lyra, stripped of their inherited wealth and forced to truly work for the first time, slowly began to learn the value of self-reliance, though the lessons were harsh and unforgiving, each day a struggle for survival. Their children, too, adjusted to a more humble life, attending public school, learning to appreciate the smaller joys, discovering resilience they never knew they possessed. Elara Thorne's story serves as a powerful reminder that true wealth lies not just in financial abundance, but in self-worth and genuine connection. Love and respect cannot be bought with money, nor can they be commanded from those who lack gratitude. Sometimes, the greatest act of self-love and the most profound lesson one can teach is to reclaim your own worth, even if it means dismantling the very foundations you painstakingly built for others who chose to abuse your kindness. It is a testament to the fact that even in the twilight of life, one can find the strength to forge a new path, free from the burdens of ingratitude, and reclaim the profound joy of living for oneself. If you found Elara's story of resilience and justice compelling, you'll love the other true tales of triumph and unexpected turns we feature on our channel. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on our next powerful narrative. We always love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a similar act of ingratitude, or had to reclaim your own power in a challenging situation? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. We're eager to hear your perspective.